okay? You're 0.4% away from your response in 2000. So you are so close to just getting to that number. And as of today, I have 27 municipalities that have already reached their 2010 number, but you are actually ahead of the county because we are still 0.3%. No, sorry, we're 0.2% away too at this point. So we're tied right now for how close we are. So just so you understand what's going on countywide, we have a low response rate in the city of Mount Vernon of 55.2%. But we have 6 or 7 municipalities at this point with response rates over 80%. And into the 2010 census, we had no municipalities with a response rate over 80%. So again, we're doing really, really well. We have 29 municipalities that already have greater than 70% of a response rate. And I think 6 of them are between 74 and 75%. So really, before we finish, we're going to have well over 30 of our municipalities that will have achieved 70% or better. So we're really, all in all, we're doing really well countywide. We're doing better than the national rate. We're doing better than the state rate. So thank you for everything that you've done. I know Connie's been out there. I've gotten pictures of some of her activities, so everything that everybody has done collectively across the country, across the county has really helped us to get there. So unless you have questions about census, I'd be happy to answer them, but otherwise I'll move on to the housing needs assessment.
Hopefully we'll get that, you'll get another % and blow away our old numbers, but who knows?
As of right now, September 30th is the closing date for the census. Okay, there is a court date on Thursday because I think it's the National Civil Liberties Union is challenging the Census Bureau's closing down on September 30th. So we are hoping maybe for an extra month, because understand, in a normal census year, the census would have enumerators out from around the middle of May until the end of July. So that's 2.5 months. This time around, our census enumerators didn't get out there until August 6th. So in August 6th and September 30th, they didn't even have 60 days. So that's why they are shortchanging the process in terms of getting their own people out, knocking door to door. We are getting daily updates from them about the percentages that they are getting. So they're saying that they counted over 92% of the households in New York. So, so hopefully we'll get there. All right. But thank you for having me on tonight for the housing needs assessment. As many of you know, the county undertook, this is not our first time doing a housing needs assessment, but we did update our housing needs assessment. It was released last November. And so what a housing needs assessment is it takes a look at the existing housing market that we have from many different angles. And this is not the first time we've done it. We did the first one in 1994 with Rutgers University, and then we did another one in 2004 with the same Center for Urban Policy Research at Rutgers. But this time around, we actually went with a more local firm. We went with Pattern for Progress out of Newburgh. So they're much more of a Hudson Valley oriented organization. So we gave them the additional assignment, though, of we didn't want to just see where the county was out with housing, but we wanted each and every municipality to understand what their own local situation was from a whole caveat of information factors about how you stand with your housing. So the report goes into it compares cities, it compares all the towns with each other, and it compares all the villages with each other. But ultimately, they're all within a page or so you can actually see where you compare with all the municipalities for all these data factors. But then in the appendices, there is actually a 7-page report specific to each municipality with many of your data factors, additional data factors that aren't even necessarily talked about within the report itself. So there's a whole lot of information in there specific to Irvington. And again, comparing it frequently to the county numbers. So I am going to take you through, Larry. I hope you can share the screen with me.
Yeah. So you should be, you want to share.
I should be able to screen. Yep.
Yeah, I think I said it so you can.
Okay. So I'm going to take mine back to the beginning of my slideshow and then actually get onto slideshow. So there we are. So let me take you through this. So again, the biggest difference between this housing needs assessment and the last ones are that we really take the data to a whole different level by giving it to you from the local municipalities. So one of the important things that we did let a couple people look at the report before it was released because we wanted to just make sure that they understood what it was saying. We understood it, but again, I deal with housing day in and day out, so it was more important for other people. And so one of the great quotes that we got was from Bill Cuddy, who's a board member from the county association, who, you know, really put it in a preface of understanding why housing is important for business in the county. So Westchester's long and short-term economic viability is predicated upon our housing inventory meeting the demands of our workforce. And so not having enough affordable housing is a call to action. You know, and it's not intractable. It's something that we can, in fact, face, each municipality helping the county to get there. So I'm going to start with a picture because, again, jobs. It's so important for us to understand how important housing is with jobs. So one of the eye openers that many people felt about this report was the fact that of all of our residents, only 172,000 of our residents live and work in Westchester. We all know Westchester has always been a bedroom community in New York City. But so more than 200,000 people continue to commute out of the county to Westchester to work. So they're commuting, most of them to New York City, some to New Jersey, Connecticut, certainly the Hudson Valley. So, you know, there's more than 200,000 people. My apologies. I hope my husband gets that. But almost just as many people are commuting into Westchester. That was the real eye opener, was that almost 200,000 people are commuting into Westchester. Okay, and this is a big, big issue. We see it on the roads. I see it every day on the Taconic Parkway. We see it on the on the Mario Cuomo Bridge. We see it on all of our parkways, all of our roadways, and as well as on the trains and buses, et cetera. So it is a tremendous issue that there are so many people that have jobs in Westchester, but cannot afford to live there or choose to not live there because of the housing prices. So let's start on the housing stock itself. The report goes into, literally, it can tell you each decade, starting in 1940, when your housing was built, how many units were built in each decade. So you could see from, you know, right after the World War II, how many units were built and then how housing has kind of slowed down a bit. But in all, this report from the publicly available data sources found that there were 885 housing units in Westchester. Now, some of you will remember that when I came and did a census presentation for you, we told you that in 2018, the summer there, when we were doing census updates, address updates for the Census Bureau, we actually found 370,000 housing units in the county, but they had to work from publicly available data sources. So we're going to stick with the 345 for the purposes of tonight's discussion. 81% of our housing stock was built before 1979. That date is relevant because in 1978, lead-based paint was banned. The likelihood is that 80% of our housing stock may have some lead-based paint. Even if it's not in the house itself, it may be on the garage outside. All right, so that's an important factor, and it's one of the reasons that the county has pursued, once again, having lead grants here to be able to help those property owners who do have lead-based paint in their homes to be able to remove it safely before any of their children are impacted. Some people were surprised to learn that Buchanan has the fewest number of of housing units, and Yonkers has the most. So we range from a small of 864 units to 82,000 housing units in the city of Yonkers. Irvington, and just so you know, for this entire presentation, I try to give you county numbers. I'll intersperse some other municipalities to help you understand where you rank. But then I always give you your data for what I talk about. So Irvington, as of 2017, had 2,559 units. 2,327 of them were occupied. All right, only 2.7% of your housing stock, only 70 units, were built between 2000 and 2017. Okay, partly because of the housing recession in 2008. No question that impacted building throughout the entire county. But yeah, only 2.7% of your housing stock was built then. 62% of the county's units are ownership. We, believe it or not, are below the national average. I think that surprised some people as well. But 81.4% of Irvington's housing stock is ownership. All right, so you are clearly way above the national average. Almost 1,900 of your units are ownership. So again, countywide, 38% of our units are rental units. If you want to guess which municipality has the most rental units, believe it or not, it's by percentage. It is the village of Sleepy Hollow. It's not Yonkers, it's not Mount Vernon, it's the village of Sleepy Hollow. So, which again was an eye opener for some people. So you have 18.6% of your housing stock as rental units. According to the data they were able to find in 2017, you had 432 rental units. Another factor we looked at, almost 90,000 people in this county were living in poverty in 2000. Countywide, that percentage grew 13.8% between 2000 and 2017. The county grew at 13.8%. Irvington's level of people living in poverty in that same time period grew 86.1%. Your renter's income, I'm going to go into it a little bit later, your renter's income dropped so significantly. It was really interesting to see the difference, and not all municipalities lost in that same time period. So that's why, you know, that's why it merits, again, you guys understanding what's important about your numbers, okay? So in 2017, you had 374 people living in poverty. In 2000, by the way, you had 201 people living in poverty. So your number grew. That 86.1% represents 173 people. During that same time, just one of your neighbors, okay, Dobbs Ferry, where you went up 86.1%, Dobbs Ferry went down in terms of the number of people living in poverty. They went down 46.3%. So where in 2000, they had 555 people living in poverty, they went down to only 298 people living in poverty. So again, just to give you some reference points. Some of the other factors that we looked at, and you did really well on these, so severely overcrowded, that means more than 1.5 people per room in a unit, not per bedroom, but per room. So severely overcrowded, you had 0. But nobody could find any overcrowded units in 2017. Also same with substandard units, which are generally units that do not have kitchens or bathrooms. And so you had 0 substandard units in Irvington, but 0.7% of the county's population, or 2,500 of the units countywide, had some issue with substandard. To give you some perspective, the high for overcrowded units, percentage-wise, was the village of Ossining. 3.5% of Ossining's housing units are considered overcrowded. But Yonkers has the most physical number of units. Over 1,300 units are considered, we're overcrowded in Yonkers. And in terms of the substandard units, Yonkers had 575. So they had 20% of all those substandard units countywide were just in Yonkers. So countywide, and under a different factor, we looked at severely cost burden. That means people paying more than 50% of their income toward their housing costs. So countywide, we had 72,327 households. So that was 21.2% of our households. In Irvington, it was only 270 severely cost burdened households. So 23%. 205 of them were owners and 65 of them were renters. So since 2005, these numbers are, so actually the foreclosures themselves are from 2000 and from 2005. So since 2005, we have had 8,168 units foreclosed upon. The highest by numbers wise was in the city of Yonkers. The number of foreclosures in Irvington were relatively insignificant. Okay, so you were not severely impacted at all by foreclosures, but many other places in Westchester were, which is why we certainly make it, bring it up as a point of note, particularly that because even though Yonkers had the most number of foreclosures, when we look at it as a percentage of their total housing units, they weren't the highest. Actually, northern Westchester was much more severely impacted by foreclosures than anywhere else in the county, with some of those municipalities, Peekskill being almost 5% of their housing units have been foreclosed upon. So let's talk about ownership and affordability, and then we'll get into rental and its affordability. Countywide, the median price of a house was $650,000 at the time that the study was done. With 5% down and covering for closing costs, somebody buying that house that cost $650,000 would need about $71,500. To purchase that house for $650,000, you need an annual income of $235,000. Okay. The annual income for a family earning no more than 80% of median, which is what we consider to be a family qualifying for affordable housing, the annual income for that family of four is $93,650. So for that family to purchase a house in the county, the gap was almost $400,000, $395,000. Even at 100% of median, which at the time this study was done was $117,000, we still had a gap of $327,000. Let's look at Irvington's numbers, and believe it or not, you're not the highest. What your median sale price was $1.2 million. All right. So the gap for the family earning $93,650 was almost $1 million for their ability to be able to afford that house. Even at 100% of median, the gap was $925,000. So the annual income needed to buy that median price of a house in Irvington is $460,000. Let's look at renters. Median renter income countywide is $36,690. The lowest is City of Peekskill. By the way, in housing, the ownership affordability, the lowest median owner's income is also in the City of Peekskill. A two-bedroom FMR at the time that the study was done, so that's the fair market rate, is $1,687 for a two-bedroom apartment, your standard, average apartment. So a family spending no more than 30% of their income, 12 months of the year, would have $917,000 available to pay rent with that income of $36,690. Just to pay for a two-bedroom unit, they already are starting out of the gate with a gap of $770, not being able to afford that apartment. Actually, in Westchester, there are only 3 municipalities where the renters' incomes were affordable. And so that was Newcastle, Bronxville, and Pelham Manor. But Irvington, this is where I said before that your numbers got really interesting. Your median renter income in 2017 was $43,287. So even for residents in Irvington to be able to afford that two-bedroom unit at the fair market rent, you had a gap of $859 a month, okay? But your income, your median renter's income in 2000 was $78,353. So your income really, really dropped off in terms of this is just your renters, not your household, your owner occupied. This is just your renters. And again, the report distinguishes between those two groups. So again, why do we look at housing? It's because jobs follow the housing. When the workforce has housing, the jobs are more interested in coming to places like Westchester. The growth lately has been in New York City, because New York City has been building housing. And I'm actually going to go to the next slide and then come back to this. Between the 2010 and 2017, this is a chart about building permits. So in this 8-year time period, the entire Hudson Valley only issued a total of 25,000 building permits. During that same time, Connecticut issued 23,000, Long Island issued 16,000. Northern New Jersey issued 151,000 building permits in the same time period. New Jersey has exploded. All right. Part of the reason, I admit this, part of the reason is New Jersey does not have seeker. We all can debate the merits or whatever of seeker, but New Jersey does not have the same seeker certainly that we do. But look at New York City. In the same time period where the 7 counties of the Hudson Valley only issued 25,000 permits, New York City issued 164,000 building permits. So the growth has been exponential in New York City in the same time period, where we have not kept up, frankly, because the recession happened, and we all know what it takes to build in Westchester, between not having basic infrastructure in certain areas, so our ability to go vertical in terms of building higher buildings is much more limited than New York City's ability to do so. So it's very clear that housing has slowed since the recession. It's much stronger in places in like New York City and New Jersey than it is in the Hudson Valley. New York City has blown us away. But what's important for us all to note here is that Westchester's workforce and our residents are now aging. In fact, the report can tell you what the age difference is now between 2000, 2010, and 2017 of each of the municipalities. And I didn't actually look at that for today, but I'll tell you, some municipalities actually saw a growth of over 200% of their over 85 population. So Westchester's getting older. By people not being close to their jobs, it's putting a strain on the transit system. It's definitely having an impact all around. So conclusions here, that's what I'm actually up to at this point. The conclusions are there is a gross need, and according to all the data that's looked at in this report, there's a gross need for 82,000 housing units. But the greatest need within there is for rental assistance. Many of these units are, we have so many people that you saw, there was a slide earlier on, 73,000 people are living in apartments they can't afford. So we need to be able to help people better afford the housing that they're living in. So if the federal government stepped up with some more rental assistance, that would certainly be helpful. But in the absence of that, everybody's trying to do what they can. The report also documents there is a need for housing rehabilitation assistance. Again, we saw not necessarily in Irvington, but there are still thousands of units in the county that are literally substandard. There's definitely a need for foreclosure counseling and assistance here in the county, home ownership counseling, et cetera. But the need, one of the most important things for everybody to understand, it's not MyDOT, and it's not just in Yonkers or not just in Peekskill or Buchanan. The need is all over Westchester. So when we take out that 73,000 households that needed the rental assistance or needed help paying the rents, the apartments that they are living in, we needed to come to a number of what's the new construction housing that we need to build here in the county. And so our new goal is now 11,703 units. And that's based on 4,500 severely overcrowded families or households. It's probably people who are doubling up, people who are sleeping on couches, they're living with somebody else. And so that clearly tells us that an additional housing unit is needed in that case. At the time of the study, we had 846 homeless families. So those were families that did not have their own housing unit. We need to find housing for them. And then also we now have home seeker data available to us. So at the time the report was done, we had 6,334 families telling us through home seeker where they had signed up, telling us that they were actively looking for affordable housing in Westchester. So when we add up the series of these three numbers, that's where we come up to the 11,703 units. So for 2020, the county executive and the board of legislators approved a budget that's letting us start to address this. And the report itself actually goes into several pages of recommendations, but it actually goes into 12 best practices that the consultants were able to find going across the country. And some of our new initiatives actually address or start to help us address some, reaching some of those initiatives, the best practices that they found. Some of them we're actually already doing, some portions of them already here. But education and training is important. Like we said before, home ownership and foreclosure counseling is definitely important. We need to get some more housing services here. We need to be able to work with employers who might match contributions toward housing to be able to, encourage employers to come here and to grow their jobs here. And we've also this year created a $300,000 housing stabilization fund, which is specifically geared in this case toward being able to help people pay their rents, okay, or get caught up with their back rents if in fact they fall behind for a valid reason. But the county executive and the board also approved $10 million for land acquisition, where we can help developers by paying the market rate of that land that they might want to buy for affordable housing and then selling it to the developer for $1. So we underwrite the cost of the land acquisition. We've also put $10 million into infrastructure funds, again, because you can't afford to build wastewater treatment plants in places where there are no sewers to be able to get, enough density to make things work without assistance. So the $10 million is already getting out the door in multiple developments this year. And we've also set aside $500,000 toward pre-development and feasibility. So if the village had sites that they wanted us to look at, we actually have funds available where we might be able to help you do some feasibility analysis of some of those sites. We are also helping municipalities by creating some model ordinances. Last year, we rolled out an accessory apartment ordinance in case, for those municipalities that did not have them, because we recognize that many of the municipalities do not have staff professional planners. This year, we're going to give you a model ordinance on senior housing. And then we're going to be working on parking requirements and office parks and adaptive reuse of buildings as well. And we've also rolled out a affordable housing inventory and tracking system that's on the county planning department's website that lets you actually look and see what existing affordable housing units exist in which communities and all the information we have about them, when they expire, what bedrooms they are, what level of affordability. So stop sharing my screen. I thank you for having me and listening to this, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Well, I'll lead off by just saying we appreciate the study and the info. I think, I think all of us on this board were acutely aware of the fact that we don't have enough affordable housing in Irvington. I think that having data always helps. Put kind of some numbers on the issue. So I look forward to reading our section in careful detail, especially as we work through, trying to create some additional opportunities for affordable housing in Irvington. I think that, we've always really appreciated all the assistance you've given us over the last, 8 years or so that we've been working on this. It's always been super helpful, from specific things like looking at a site to, potential site to, trying to work through some laws. You've always been unbelievably helpful to us. So we really appreciate that.
You're welcome. I appreciate, I love doing it. So, and my staff love helping as well. So.
Nora, I have a quick question, and I
Sure.
agree with the mayor that you have been incredibly helpful. Maybe offline or later sometime, I'm very interested in the senior housing. I don't mean assisted living, I mean housing, because I started to look on Google across Westchester to see what I could find and when they were built and how I ask about how legal they are, and they are. But that's something I'd like to know about, especially when you talked about the senior percentage of population. And the other thing I wrote down, you said a two-bedroom apartment, an average monthly cost is $1,687. Did I write that down right?
You did. That was the fair market rent. But again, that goes back at this point 2 years ago, 2018's data.
Okay. So, just to think about if we have multifamily units and they create, of course, rental units, what is actually affordable? You could build a multifamily zoned unit development and maybe they're still not affordable. So how do you make that happen? You can't tell a developer exactly what to do, but again, this is maybe for another time, but those are two things I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah, well, as I said, the growth in seniors and our population of seniors in some municipalities was just huge, over 200% increases just in the 85 and over.
Right.
So there's no question there is still a need for senior housing in this county because the units that we've been able to build certainly have long waiting lists. And many of the market rate developments just really aren't affordable for most people. So there certainly continues to be a need for senior housing. Again, I will tell you that in our looking at pulling together a model ordinance for municipalities to consider related to senior housing, we found that 12 different municipalities had 15 different ordinances. Right. So right now, only 12 municipalities actually have zoning specific in their code to senior housing, recognizing, that seniors, there's a lower parking requirement for seniors, and there's other things that, you can factor into. So yeah, it's been interesting to see why there were more ordinances than there were municipalities, but we'll cover that when we release that model ordinance. At this point, it's going to probably be like November or early December.
Right. Well, maybe I can talk to you later about those 15 municipalities. I could just, look at what
Sure.
we have. Yeah, thank you.
You know where to find me.
You bet. Thanks.
Norma, on a broader level, was trying to create opportunities for more affordable rental units. If we are now, dealing with this new North Broadway zoning and are looking at specifically multifamily so that we can encourage more affordable housing. But I think there's a bit of a disconnect here, because what we don't want to wind up with is a whole bunch of high-end apartments, and how do we reckon for that? I mean, we have our own ordinance about percentage of new construction, or percentage has to be affordable, but we'd like to do more than that. And I'm not quite sure. And maybe you can help us figure that out. How do we realize our goal for more?
So I will tell you that probably about, I want to say 2008, when we did a study of office parks, we actually took a look at redeveloping office parks and including housing in them, because again, we were starting to see office parks start to disappear. Okay, well, the parks themselves were still there, but the businesses wanting to work and live in those, office parks was declining. And one of the things that we found is that the areas that already have infrastructure really can afford a higher percentage. They could afford a 15% of number of affordable units within the development without it causing too much pain to that developer. Of course, every developer is never going to agree to that. They'll push back. But when the infrastructure is there, you have the ability to actually reach a higher percentage without it being too impactful. Again, every municipality is different. We looked at multiple sites particularly along the 287 corridor when we did that study. So we probably would have to brush, and that's one of the reasons we're going to look at it soon as a model ordinance, because we want to take a new look at what that cost would be now and what that percentage would actually be at this point in time. But yeah, that one of the things the county planning board is regularly recommending is that developers unbundle the parking from the rent cost, so that number one, we're reducing the number of renters who rely on cars, as particularly if you're very close to a train line and a train station or close to the bus lines, and they make the rent tenants pay extra for that parking space, because then by its nature, that should make the rents more affordable. So again, there are a couple things we could certainly help you look at. And I don't think we've gotten that referral yet. Larry?
No, not yet. No, as a matter of
Okay.
fact, I should, one of the things about having meetings in the summer is we haven't had very many of them. So the board is due for an update for a little bit of information that we've gathered over the last few weeks along with Mary Ann, our village attorney. And I did reach out to Norma. Norma was very helpful to put me in touch with another planner in the office.
Our chief
there.
planner,
And
yes, yeah.
Chief planner, sorry, our Pat Natarelli replacement, as it turns out,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So, and we've done other research as well. So we have some information to talk about, and I think it'll be helpful for the discussion.
Great, thank you.
I was speaking of Pat Natarelli replacement, our planning board chairman in Irvington actually is on the line and he has his hand up. So I don't know if we wanted to see what Caesar had to say.
Caesar, did you have a question? Yeah, you just have to
Okay.
unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah, this is Caesar Manfredi. I'm chairman of the planning board in Irvington and previously the regional director of DEC Hudson Valley Region 3. Have you considered the fact that the New York City watershed would probably be near impossible to build any of these high density without the infrastructure or even utilizing the existing, so that anything that you're talking to meet the shortfall of affordable housing, I think you have to pretty much practically exclude the New York City watershed, which is, probably from limited to nil opportunities to build.
So Caesar, thank you. And thank you for your service, certainly as our planning board, as the planning board chair there. I appreciate that. I'm chair of my own local zoning board, so I understand, we have to do all this work, but we have considered the watershed. There are 12 municipalities in Westchester that comprise the New York City watershed, or component or pieces of it. But believe it or not, the watershed agreement actually has a carve out that allows us to do affordable housing within it. So we have actually been able to create a couple developments, and North Salem did 65 units, and Somers has certainly done some at this point, and Yorktown has done some. So we have been able to build some affordable housing in the watershed communities because affordable housing was specifically carved out. But certainly we had to build a wastewater treatment plant with the one on June Road in North Salem. It just didn't, the capacity wasn't there to process the sewage. So yeah, it certainly is much more expensive to be able to develop, which is why you need some density of units to make some of these infrastructure costs work. So yeah, that's why I'm telling you, infrastructure was definitely a component. This report doesn't go into so much about infrastructure, and it recognizes that there are limitations on certain areas of the county to be able to build. But that's why I'm telling you, it takes a look at each municipality so that you understand what your data is and what what you got, what your costs are.
Well, my point was the limitations of the watershed, which is a big chunk of the county, puts more pressure on communities like Irvington, which has the infrastructure, but perhaps not too much open land where there's even possible. And of course, the rezoning along Broadway may be involved with that ability to have affordable housing.
Sure. I mean, south of 287, if there's a site hasn't been developed, there's generally a reason that site hasn't been developed. So we have seen the limitations of the all the virgin sites that are out there many times at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I had a question that, based on what Janice was asking, I think it was Janice, I lost track, or maybe Connie, but how do you go about specifying in zoning that you decouple parking from units?
You don't necessarily have to do it in zoning, unless your code actually allows you to do a reduced rate. So I think Portchester was looking at reducing. What they created was different zones for their parking. So ones that are closer to transit-oriented development had different rates or different requirements for parking, but also had to put in place where, how they were making up for it. If they were allowing for a certain amount of bicycle parking, they were going to be allowed to reduce some of their parking requirements as well. So you can do it through zoning, but we certainly recommend that municipalities look at it, potentially even just land banking some of that parking and making the developers build it on later. What we discourage you from doing, by the way, is those developers that say, oh, I'm going to put a shuttle up, I'm going to provide a shuttle. And then a year or two later, they come back and say, well, nobody's really using the shuttle. Can I get rid of it? And then we come to find out nobody's using the shuttle because it doesn't run at convenient times, because they're charging out, rates that just don't make sense. And it's just easier for the people to walk. So we do caution you about shuttles.
Norma, can I?
We've
Norma,
learned some
can I
tricks
ask
on
you
that.
Oh.
Sure, Marianne, go ahead.
One of the things I've been toying with, as you know, Irvington does have an affordable requirement that's, pretty, it's 10%, it's, significant. But I was looking at the possibility of sort of workforce, but not necessarily workforce housing, where the housing would have to be affordable to people at, let's say, 120% of the median county income. So we're talking about affordable housing with a small a and a small h, whether it's 120, 150. But the role, I don't want to say roadblock, but one real issue I see is regulating that. Like with the affordable housing, you've got the Housing Action Council that helps out with making sure that the people who are there are within the right income and stuff, and that is being sold for the right price and stuff. Is there any kind of agency that helps with that? Obviously, it would be a really big burden for the village to take on.
I believe the village has already passed a resolution authorizing the county to act as your agent to monitor your affordable housing.
Right.
I remember doing that a couple years ago.
Yes.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah.
I'm already in a position.
I'm not talking about the affordable. Let's say we passed something that, you know, said a certain, you would get a bonus, a density bonus, if you made it affordable to a wider range of people. And you had some income limit there.
If you put a deed restriction on the property and the units were up to 120% of affordable, we would still monitor them for you.
Only up to that point, to the 120.
Yeah, the county has several programs that we've had over the years that have allowed us to create units and keep them affordable that go up to 120% of median. And that's actually Sunny Mae's limit. So that's one of the reasons the county has looked at that 120% of median as well.
And for
We would
rental,
cover you up to that percentage.
for rentals as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
If we were in a meeting room, I would probably take a moment to point out that we have members of our housing committee at the meeting.
Oh, cool.
I don't need to introduce them all individually, but we do have members looking on, and I think they're happy that you're here. And you know, thank you for joining in with watching the meeting here.
Thank you all, everybody, for coming. It's really helpful that you have multiple boards members there to be able to hear the same discussion. Because that's all the county executive has asked is that you start the discussion. Understand what your numbers are, take the time to see what you'd find as your gaps and where you want to focus your attention. The solution's not going to be the same in every municipality.
Great.
Right?
So look forward to continuing to work with you on finding some solutions as we go forward.
Thank
you,
you.
Norma.
Thank
I'll
you.
be in touch shortly.
Have a good night, everybody. I got to go write some census reports.
Very much.
Good night.
Have a good night.
You too. Okay.
Great. Well, that was interesting. A lot of interesting facts, even outside of Irvington, that were interesting. The next up is discussion of process for police reform and reinvention collaborative, which is actually the governor's term for this project that we started before the governor made us. But we just wanted to publicly discuss the kind of how we're gonna go about this going forward. We've been informally and formally working on this since June, I guess. And then by the time we kind of got everything, started to see our path forward, we kind of hit August, and then it was, people were away, and we didn't really want to start up a whole committee when there's going to be a lot of people out of town. So the way I envision this and starting and going, and happy to hear the board's input, Mary Ann and Larry's input on this, is that we start off with a meeting similar to what Tarrytown had, that would serve as the kickoff, as well as kind of a kind of informally set up. We'd have probably had maybe the chief make a presentation, maybe Larry. That's what Tarrytown kind of did, and then just open it up for questions, concerns, comments, ideas from the community, and that way, I think that'll help frame everything else we do in the coming weeks. So. That to me looks like a good first step. That would not likely be a Board of Trustees meeting. It would probably just be a separate standalone meeting, the way Tarrytown had it, and we'd allocate a couple hours to kind of just having a dialogue, really. Then after that meeting, which Larry and I were talking about, scheduling. It's amazing how we're halfway through September already, so it might be early October at this point. And then we do have, I don't know, Larry, 15 or so people who've volunteered already.
Yeah, about that.
Between 10 and 20 anyway,
Yeah.
people who have volunteered for the committee. I'm sure that after our meeting that night, we might have some more. If the board has people you want me to reach out to that you think might be good on it, Janice has already helped with a few people that from her professional contacts that could be potentially facilitate a meeting. We'd form the committee formally. I think it's important to also note that in addition to resident and expert participation, the police are also going to be very involved in this. This isn't some kind of witch hunt that we're on. This is a working collaborative group that's trying to get us, the best policies and procedures to have the best police department we possibly can. So, I think it's very important to point out that the police will be involved in this and have a voice in all this. And then I anticipate kind of a monthly meeting, maybe of the large committee group, and then similar to the comprehensive plan or, some other large tasks we've undertaken, we probably break into smaller groups, especially if we have, say 20, 25, 30 people. You might have, say 3 groups of 10 that could meet, once or twice a month. I guess now with Zoom meetings, it does make things easier. And so they can meet and, either talk about specific areas that we assign. These are all the details we can figure out once the committee's formed. But if it's, kind of, everyone's working on the same task and coming up with ideas, or if it's, hey, you guys can look at these, you guys can look at these, because it's not just the policy and procedure review, it's hiring practices, it's figuring out ways to expand hiring, look at what's worked in other municipalities that are similar, things like that. So there's a lot of areas to work on. And there's going to be enough, work to go around, I think. But how long it will take, I don't know. I think it's going to be, the policies and procedures, just having them internally reviewed has taken several months because they're pretty meaty. So it's going to take a while to go through those. It's going to take a while to come up with ideas and look at, other, departments that have done things really well or done things really poorly that we want to, make sure that we emulate or not. So I think, there's a lot to do, but that's kind of the format of it. I think we'll fill in the details once the committee's formed, but that was kind of my idea of kind of how to move forward. And, I think we should, I thought it was helpful to talk publicly about it if we, have other ideas or solutions or concepts that we want to bring to this, but you have to start somewhere. And it does somewhat seem like a very large task. So.
Well, I would just comment that I think it's important. I'm glad to hear that Janice has, reached out to some of her contacts, because I think it's important to not only have residents and board members and police members, but to have people with the level of expertise. It's going to be hard to have a subcommittee that's not going to have someone who can facilitate those specific areas. So I hope as part of our group, we have enough people with a level of expertise.
Yeah.
Some of them actually live in Irvington, which is value added.
That's even better, right?
Double win, yeah.
One of the things I like about the plan that you're proposing, Brian, one of my concerns was that committees can get so big that they are useless. But if we have enough people who really want to participate in this work, we can chunk it out, keep the number of people a viable group size, and perhaps assign different tasks or different aspects of things to look at. So that allows as many people as want to participate to do so, but keep some control of keeps it manageable and not unwieldy.
And I think the one last thing I didn't say, I kind of alluded to it by saying I'm not sure how long this is going to go on. I also don't know if I don't anticipate necessarily having a grand report that's, like a comprehensive plan that's glossy and we present. To me, it's almost like if we're working on things, we meet and in, the end of October, we say, hey, here's 2 things we want to do right away. We don't have to wait until we're done to start enacting.
Right.
Kind of, be doing things as we go. And this might go on in perpetuity, so it's.
Right, and that's why it's so important to have police involvement, and because then you can just hit the ground running. It's not like a citizen group makes a recommendation and now you first have to negotiate that.
Yeah, and I'm anticipating our police having a lot of great ideas on how to to make things even better. So it's not again that we're going to be dictating all these things. I think from discussions I've had informally with the officers and some of the leadership, they're happy to try to have the best department possible, which I think is also refreshing to see that going in. This isn't an us against them thing. This is all of us who want to have Irvington be a leader in policing and everything else, which is why I'm sad we're only 13th on the census data. But
So I know we've had some earlier discussions, and you described, Brian, to us, like I think it was back in June when we first started talking about this. But I would like to also say, similarly to what Janice and Larry said is that professional leadership for this committee, the bigger committee, and keeping the direction going forward, so that some tasks are achieved. And I know I had some groups that I suggested. I don't know if you have contacted or there is some leadership that you're bringing in that we have decided on. If so, I kind of missed that part, but I think who is leading this or giving some advice, not running it, but kind of providing a structures in a professional way so that tasks are achieved and progress is made. Is there some group that we have decided on that could play that role?
You mean the people that actually run the meeting?
Yeah.
As opposed to being, I actually thought we could, I feel like we've done enough of these kind of breakout sessions that I thought we could actually do that part. I thought what we needed the experts for was more the actual subject matter, which is what we had Janice kind of, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the people, Janice, but, not to put you on the spot, but, but if we really think we need a David Smith to run the meetings, frankly, I always thought that we had kind of ended up running our meetings anyway. But we could do that. If that's what it seems like we need, we definitely could do that.
I wouldn't be too cavalier about, the seriousness of this and the need for bringing as much help into this process to keep it going in a positive and productive way. So I think I probably would come down on the side of some well-respected organization who has done this before. But Janice, go ahead. I'm interested in your.
I'm not naming names tonight, but there are certainly people from Pace Law School who have run these types of meetings, who have done this in other communities, and they also are very interconnected and have many contacts. So I think we have a rich resource there.
Okay, well, that would be that. Those are the kinds of.
They're not professional meeting runners, but they've done these processes many times. So
yes.
Well, I call that professional. I call that professional meeting runners.
There are process management people that you can bring in, but to me, I don't think we need. I'm happy to have the professors and
yeah, they're not facilitators, meeting facilitators.
Right.
I think that's what you meant. They're people
that's what I mean. Yeah,
expertise in this area to the conversation.
They've been involved in these before. We could potentially, we'll see how it goes, Connie, but if we think we need to bring in an actual meeting facilitator that.
Well, what I'm looking for is a combination, a professional organization. I remember I went online early on when we started talking about this, and there were leads to groups that are willing and able to help local communities.
I reached out to about a dozen of them and nobody got back to me. I think they're all swamped, but if you have a contact that runs these, let me know. So I reached out, I think about to a dozen different places, and I heard back from two of them that one of them said they only work with cities, and another one said, we'll see if we can get back to you, and never got back to me. So the other 10 didn't even get back to me at all. So I think it's just everybody's doing. New York State has a mandate now too, right? So, New York State actually said they were thinking about providing people. But I think if we wait for them, that then we'll never get anything done. So
no, I wouldn't be surprised if Pace Law School, with the people we know there, might be able to play a double role in this, to provide some of that facilitating as well as the expertise. I think it's an important part of it.
Anybody else?
So do we have any time frame? I think you were talking about, you thought it would be October for this initial meeting,
You're just kind of looking at
public meeting?
Maybe as early as September 30th, but that was kind of the first date that looks good. We try not to have it the same night as other village meetings and all that kind of stuff.
And does this have a name? Is it called Irvington Police Reform Initiative, or what is the public being told that this is?
I don't think we've come up with the name tonight. We just used the name that the governor used, but to me, it's a little cold. Whether I'm not even sure what a reinvention collaborative is, but I do. We could probably work on the name in the next week or so and get something we all agree on.
I mean, if somebody.
Yeah, I agree the name. I agree the name is important, and I would like to avoid police reform.
Yeah, I think me too.
Should avoid anything that sets us up as us them. This is us together working and making a better police community.
Better community overall. Yeah.
Right, well,
Something
that.
with improvement and collaborative or something. Yeah.
Yes, collaboration is an important word, and communication and sharing and coming to some creation of some specifics at the end of it all. So I don't know what that title is, but somebody can wordsmith it.
Did you want to try to put a hard date together so we can, the sooner the information's out, the better?
Sure.
So you suggested September 30th, which is a Wednesday?
Correct.
So
Stay with me.
It's okay with me.
I don't think there's any dates on the 30th or any Irvington meetings. So
no village meetings, no. The planning board will be the following Wednesday.
yep. Then
We
we
should
have
probably, sorry.
no, go ahead.
We should probably check if there are some key people that we do want to make sure that they're available before we set this in stone.
Like your people as well, Janice. Yeah.
I just want to say the only thing that I've been thinking about this whole time is the possibility or probability that this becomes contentious in some way. And so I think there's got to be we got to have a way to clearly define the ground rules to try to make it not become, finger pointing and anecdotal, can you believe they did this kind of thing. I mean, I think it's not us versus them is important to make anything happen constructively. But I think maybe key to that first meeting is really setting some very strong ground rules about what's acceptable behavior. We don't want someone getting up on a soapbox and start berating the police activity, as an example. So that's what my concern is. Not everyone is going to come to this graciously.
Sure. I think I agree with that once the committee starts meeting. I think for the first meeting, that's kind of the open forum. I think that, at least what we saw in Tarrytown was there is some of that, kind of, the police are bad, the police are great kind of, speeches that you get. And I don't know, I'm not sure how much we want to diffuse that before we start.
I was more thinking of the committee meetings themselves.
I agree. I think once the committee meeting starts, that's when we're working together, to just make it the best community and community policing we have. So I agree with you, Mark, that there have to be almost like a list of guidelines, and maybe that's something Janice's folks can help with as well, with how you do that in a constructive manner without telling people you can't speak your mind, but saying let's just frame things in a very constructive manner that we're all pulling for the same team here. So I agree with you, Mark, for sure, because otherwise we'll never get anything done.
Well, that I agree with Mark too. I think that's part of the reason I'm thinking of adding a layer of professionalism about this from the get-go to help with that goal.
But again, I think Brian also made it clear that this initial meeting, is really an opportunity for the public to speak their mind. I would think as long as someone is willing to identify who they are and that they live in the village, I guess.
Yeah, I keep forgetting it's going to be on Zoom. I anticipated it being people in person. So
Right.
I think you'd have to use a real name and that kind of thing.
But I think we have to expect to hear some painful things and perhaps accusations. I want people to feel free, especially at this first meeting, to be heard. And
I think too, I found, from the feedback that I've gotten from residents is this isn't all kind of, either racial or, it's not always those types of issues. I had emails about the police shouldn't hassle kids in the woods, and I had the police should do everything they can to keep kids out of the woods. So, like we're going to hear a wide range of things. It's not just going to be kind of a Black Lives Matter kind of, audience. I think it's going to be, this is really about community policing, and it's going to be about, they don't write enough tickets. I can't believe I got a ticket. We're going to get we're going to get the whole gamut, I anticipate. So it should be an interesting evening for sure.
And they'll hear each other, which is part of what's important about that. So if there are people saying they write too many tickets, they don't write enough tickets, they'll be in the same room with each other, and it won't be the police responding to each of them. It'll be listening to each other.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a key point, Janice. I think what worries me is that about the first meeting is just if the police representation feels they have to answer questions, on the spot, and they'll most likely end up feeling boxed in, put into a corner by some of the complaints of residents, which may or may not be true, but they're anecdotal, and therefore, so I would think would be better handled almost like our public comment period, where it's like everyone can comment, don't expect a reply at this point. I mean, that's my take, because when you get into the replies is where you start getting into defensiveness, and other kinds of stuff will spiral out of control.
So almost more of an airing of the grievances than a conversation.
Well, I don't know how strictly you want to do it, but I mean, that's one thing that helps someone for what they've said, but we don't. We generally don't respond. Every once in a while, Brian takes the bait, but generally we don't. And it doesn't devolve very quickly. I've seen it in Greenberg, where they reply and it devolves totally into like a big audience mosh pit. So I think that's what we kind of want to avoid.
I mean, it's almost maybe we say that, we'll respond to the questions at a later date or something, like almost.
The ones that are specifically questions, yeah. But if it's just like, here's my thoughts, my issues, my concerns, that doesn't really require a response. Right. It's just, thank you. That's, we've noted that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, that's a valuable point. Did we mention, maybe everyone knows, isn't it April 1st that the governor requires that we submit a document, right? Yeah, okay. Just so there is an end to this, at least as far as New York State is requiring municipalities to do this. That's not to say it doesn't, become an ongoing communication way longer than that. But however we frame the original invitation to the public, it seems to me we need a little explanation about where this came from and what its goal, at least, April 1st is a required date.
I mean, I think we could, we're looking briefly at what the governor wanted. I think that's something Larry and I could probably bang out this weekend if we really wanted to. So it wasn't too onerous. It was typically a little bit like a, typical New York State kind of feel good thing to me, to be honest. But so I think that, I think that first night we'll kind of say, where did this start? I publicly took the Obama pledge, back in June. So that's, I think my time is up at the end of this month, actually, for that, kind of the 90 days of, what have you done? Again, it didn't say it had to be done. You just had to come back and say what you've done. So I think that there's, been a bunch of reasons why we've done this. Also, it's just the right thing to do. Like we were talking about doing this before, the governor told us to, just because it felt right with everything that was going on in the world. So, I agree that we do have that deadline hanging over our head, but I think that's fairly easy hurdle to overcome. Okay. Well, again, we can we'll work out the details. Kind of. I think that the first meeting, I guess we can come up with a lot of ground rules for that in the next couple of weeks. But I think the actual committee itself, we can quickly form after that kickoff meeting, and hopefully. Janice can talk to her contacts and see if they're willing. If we have, too strong, then we could probably break into two groups anyway if we have to, that kind of thing. So we can follow up on that offline, Janice.
Sure.
Okay, so we're not setting an actual date, but we'll zero in on one offline, just, and then
Yeah, it
we'll
was, we're just,
publicizing it now.
early October, late September. I'll make a motion to adjourn to executive session regarding a personnel matter. If I can have a second.
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 All in favor?
Bye.
Do you want us to dial back in, or are you just going to shut down?
No, you have a link in your email.
So we leave this meeting and
Leave
join,
this and go into that. Yep.
okay.